Hello and welcome to the third episode of All Five Rounds. I am your co-host, Ty O'Keefe, and I will be joined in a few seconds by my other host, Daren Loucks, where we will talk about all things MMA. Obviously, we've got a big fight this Saturday, Justin Gaethje and James Vick. We're going to tee it off in Lincoln in the main event. But as always, there seems to be a ton more action outside the octagon than there is. A lot of stuff going on with the recently announced Chris Weidman Rockhold fight. Rockhold talking about maybe going up to 205 pounds. But before we dive into any of that, as always, the show is brought to you by Dialogue. If you want to get started on broadcasting live audio over internet or over Twitter, rather, just go to getdialogue.com, hit host a call, and you can talk about anything you want. It's a great way to find other people with similar interests and spread the word. All right, so back to the UFC. Now, I know I was talking to my esteemed co-host earlier this evening about this Justin Gaethje, James Vick fight. It's the elephant in the room we can't ignore. You know, they're not top five guys, but these are significant lightweights. Justin Gaethje came over from a World Series of Fighting with a ton of pipe behind him, but losing 2 out of 3, obviously he hasn't done what the UFC's wanted him to do. Do you think that Justin Gaethje is a must win situation for him this weekend?
You know what? I absolutely think it's a must win for him. I think when you talk about his record and how it has been a little disappointing since he's come over, he does need to win. His style of fighting doesn't really lend to a long career, particularly. Anyone who's watched any of his fights will see, he loves to swing for the fences, keep his hands down, and look for the finish one way or another, whether it's him getting finished or him finishing somebody. So, that doesn't lend to a long career. And I think I did hear as well that he's, possibly looking at maybe having two fights, maybe 3 left in him. So he needs to win. Unfortunately, they paired him up with James Vick, probably the biggest lightweight in the entire division at 6'3".
Yeah, he heats like a monster. That kid too.
Monster, and this is, to me, this is a bad matchup for Justin Gaethje because the way he throws. I mean, I enjoy watching him fight. I know a lot of people will call him a brawler, and he is, but he's technical in his brawling in that he's very conscious to always turn over his hip on every shot. He swings through everything. He follows everything up with leg kicks. He puts a high volume of strikes out there, and really pressures guys. To me, this is a bad matchup for him with James Vick, just because James is so tall, and his striking is also his main strength, and he fights long.
Yeah,
And that's where I see the problem with this fight, unfortunately, for Gaethje, because you fight a long, tall guy, and with that style, when you're always throwing hooks and uppercuts and things like that, the long straight punches land while those hooks are kind of still thrown in the air. For me, I hope he really sort of evaluates what type of fighter James Vick is. I hope he looks for takedowns. I hope he looks for front leg kicks, and butters him up with that, and is able to break inside the range and use his power shots, which he's going to have to. But
and you're absolutely right, because Justin Gaethje, he's such a scrapper, and he just seems like one of those guys you'd find behind a bowling alley fighting for like $10, back in 1971 or something.
yeah,
And the thing is, though, there's 2 problems as I see it for James Vick. Number one is that Justin Gaethje is one hell of a wrestler. He proved that collegiately. And when you got a guy who's a scrapper, who's willing to take so many shots in the face, and not only just the way he takes his shots, he exposes himself intentionally in order to close the distance, because he doesn't possess the athletic ability necessary to close distance without taking all of that abuse. I mean, let's be honest. That's why he has to do that. he takes shots in the face because he's not as quick as some of the top lightweights are, like Conor McGregor. He doesn't have the head movement and stuff like that, or Dustin Poirier. And Gaethje is not that accurate of a striker. Well, maybe statistically, I'm telling you, he's a sloppy striker. But when you have a guy like that, Vick, who is so overpowering, and he can easily get him into the cage, hit him a couple times, and you think, okay, Gaethje's going down. Gaethje has that wrestling to lean on, and Vick has nothing in that even atmosphere, not even the same universe of ground game as Justin Gaethje does. And it's so hard to finish a scrapper as it is, but a scrapper with a Division I collegiate ground game like that, I mean, that's a pain in the ass. I could see that fight going a very long time. This could be a very bloody, unanimous decision. Maybe the ref. I hate to, it's like predicting the fight already. I hate to just count out Justin Gaethje like this, but I mean, maybe the ref would come in and get some mercy and say, "Hey, look, okay, let's stop this." But I could easily see this being a very bloody, very painful night for Justin Gaethje on the end of wrong end of a unanimous decision. And
it doesn't have to be, though, just like you're saying with the wrestling. If he decides to use his wrestling, if he decides to use those leg kicks and expose that front leg on James Vick, if he decides to do all that first, applying pressure with his wrestling, Vick a little more gun shy, a little hesitant to throw even kicks, may turn Vick into strictly a boxer while he's out there with a hobbled leg if he's continually attacking the leg, and it could change the whole fight for Gaethje. So I really hope that he does at least at times use the wrestling to his advantage and do that. I know he's a pressure fighter, but he can apply that pressure in that way as well. To me, actually, like if I was the UFC and I heard that he was thinking possibly of retiring in 2 or 3 fights, this isn't the fight to give him. I would have gave him one of the Diaz boys. Why not Nate? Like, why make that fight with Dustin Poirier?
Well, I'll tell you why. Because I'll tell you why is because they can't get Nate Diaz to agree to fight anybody, even Dustin Poirier, really for sure right now. So it's hard to get him in there against anybody. But that's a very good idea, to see a Gaethje fight like that. That's a good point.
Yeah, I would have preferred that, to be 100% honest. I feel like the UFC is kind of pushing him out the door by sending this kind of matchup to him. But we'll see what Gaethje does. Like I said, if he uses the wrestling to his advantage, this is a winnable fight for him.
Well, the thing is that it's just not that he has 2 or 3 fights left. Gaethje has actually said that if he is outclassed by Vick, he will hang him up right away. And he will retire Saturday. It will be his last fight. Now, he's kind of walked that back by saying outclassed doesn't necessarily mean, getting beaten up by. So that, I guess that technically means, Vick could kick the snot out of Gaethje, and Gaethje doesn't feel he was outclassed. And then keeps fighting the last 2-3 fights on his contract or whatever. But to come out and say that he would actually hang up his gloves for good if he's outclassed by Vick, and that Vick is such, he's really made it clear that he doesn't think Vick is even close to his level. He's been, pretty disrespectful about Vick's all-around game and his chances in this fight. And so Vick's also going to become another chip on his shoulder, and kind of rightfully so. He's won at least, his last fight, he beat Francisco Trinaldo, which unfortunately that's the knock against Vick. He's won 4 straight, but he hasn't really beaten anybody. I mean, he's beaten Joe Duffy, who famously beat Conor McGregor back in Europe years ago, and he beat Marco Polo Reyes, and he beat Abel Trujillo. But that, those of his 4-fight winning streak, anyways. But we're not talking, top 5 guys here. No. And overall, James Vick hasn't beaten anybody of consequence. So this is also like kind of a stepping stone fight for James Vick as well. And this is something that could be big for him.
Right. And you know what? And Justin Gaethje then isn't it doesn't sound all that crazy then to hear him say that if he gets outclassed, because you know what? If I was in the top 10 in the lightweight division, as Justin Gaethje is, and I got outclassed by a guy who's just on the outside or 10, as the UFC has him ranked, and this guy, I perceive him to not even have high enough skills to be in there with me. He doesn't have any of the names. He hasn't fought any big names like I have, and the guy outclasses me. I would definitely probably think about hanging him up as well.
Especially considering that he's gotten, two out of his 3 fights in the UFC he's lost. It's not like Justin Gaethje's coming in here with a ton of momentum.
No.
He's had some good fights, but he's had, let's be honest, he hasn't looked anything like the champion that the UFC was hoping for. And let me just point out, this is yet another example of a champion coming over from a smaller promotion who was supposed to do all these fantastic things and came over to UFC and found out real quick that, things aren't like that. It's UFC for a reason, which is exactly what I think would have happened to Ben Askren if he comes over. I still think Ben Askren would be dealing with a very Justin Gaethje-like fate right now if he were to come over. Oh yeah, I really do. I don't think Ben Askren is anything near what people against today's welterweights. These guys are monsters. You got Darren Till, Stephen Thompson. We got guys in the welterweight division of every discipline who are absolute monsters. And I just think that Ben Askren is too one-dimensional, and he's not a good enough striker. That's just my opinion, whatever. Anyways, moving on to something that I find far more intriguing. I was really happy to hear that this Weidman-Rockhold fight, the rematch, after all these years, it seems like, man, this should have happened for a long time ago. I mean, anyways, this should happen a long time ago. It seems like one of the fights that's so obvious, but obviously Chris Weidman's been hurt, and so has Rockhold as well. And there's been a lot of back and forth between these two. Obviously, this is the fight where Rockhold became a UFC champion when he knocked out. I think he knocked out Chris Weidman, and that was way back. Let me just check the files here. That was December of 2015, 4th round knockout. And since then, Chris Weidman has lost to Yoel Romero in a 3rd round knockout. And he was knocked out, to my surprise, by Gegard Mousasi in April 2017 at UFC 210 in a 2nd round knockout loss. But I was very, very, very happy to see him bounce back against a very game opponent in Kelvin Gastelum. Last summer, he submitted him in the 3rd round, and that was the last time we've seen Weidman fight. Now, this rematch could be, I mean, as far as I'm concerned, one of the best fights of the year. Do you think that, regardless of how little Rockhold and Weidman have fought lately, do you think that this could produce an immediate contender at 205, the winner of this fight?
205 or 185?
Well, I believe they're fighting at, my bad, at 185.
Yeah.
Obviously, yeah, sorry about that. Yep, you're absolutely right.
Yeah. Well, I mean, at 185, I mean, they do. Rockhold is, I think, ranked number 2 in the UFC's rankings for middleweight, with Yoel Romero at number 1. Yoel Romero is not going to get a title shot anytime soon. Not to mention he's out with for 4 to 5 months, I believe, with a surgery. And then you've got Weidman ranked at number 3. So it does kind of equate to doing that. However, Rockhold has come out and said that he's looking at the light heavyweight division, and saying that that's a division that he'd like to fight at. So I don't know what the plans are if he beats Weidman. If he beats Weidman, I assume they would give him a shot at Whittaker for the title, but I guess that remains to be seen. And maybe if he loses, maybe he's setting himself up in case he loses to go to the light heavyweight division.
They're working on the fight for the UFC 230 in New York City, which obviously makes sense. And that, I believe, is in November 3rd. And so we do have a lot to see. It's tough to see with these guys having been out of action. Like, are we going to get these guys in an octagon together, like, for real? It seems like something that's so far-fetched, even if the fight is set officially. You know what I mean? It's like, is it really going to happen? And if it's not really going to happen, is it worth all of this discussion? And I mean, it is, because it's such an intriguing matchup. But I can see why Rockhold would want to go to the light heavyweight division, just simply because I believe a lot of these fighters are going to continue to want to move up as they get older. It's harder to cut that weight. And, like I know Darren Till is going to move up, and There's a lot of other people who've been talking about moving up, and it's healthier, it's smarter. I'm always for, anytime I hear about a guy moving up, I'm always for it. I think it's a great idea. But do you think age has something to do with his decision to go up to 205 after this fight, or do you think it's simply because Cormier is going to be out of the picture?
I think it has a little more to do with the fact that Cormier is going to be defending the heavyweight title before he ever defends that light heavyweight title.
Yeah,
So really likes the matchup with the number one ranked light heavyweight Alexander Gustafsson, simply because Gustafsson is not known as a one-punch knockout artist. I think
yeah,
wrestling's a little weaker, and we don't know all that much about his ground game off his back and whatnot. So I think Luke Rockhold is confident in some of those matchups. And to be honest, when you look at a lot of the fighters that are listed in the light heavyweight division right now, it's definitely not one of the most stacked divisions in the UFC. So Luke Rockhold being a taller middleweight and definitely a heavier muscle set guy, I could see why going to 205 makes sense, particularly if his friend Daniel Cormier, training partner Daniel Cormier, is not going to be defending the light heavyweight title anytime soon.
yeah. And it's not just that he's not going to be defending. I don't think he'll defend it ever again, because he has made it very clear that when he just turns 40 or 39, whatever his next birthday is next April, he has made it clear that that's it. He's done as of April 2019. And so, as far as I'm concerned, that means he'll fight Lesnar when Lesnar, I don't think Lesnar could even fight until December or January. And so he'll fight Lesnar then, and whenever he can come back, and then he'll only have 2 or 3 months. I doubt he'll try to cram a camp into that. And so his 40th birthday comes in April, and that's it. And he's sticking to that. And I really think that Cormier is one of those guys who will not waver on when, if he says he's done on that date, he's done. And he's been saying that for over a year. And so I think we're only going to see Daniel Cormier fight once. It'll be a heavyweight title defense against Lesnar. Hopefully he'll, do what he's got to do to defend the belt, and it'll go back to, which is why I go back, continue to say Stipe Miocic is the most significant heavyweight in the UFC still right now, because a year from now, he will still be the best heavyweight there, and that one loss should not negate all he's accomplished thus far. Nevertheless, that's a whole nother rabbit hole. I'm just saying, I don't think we'll see Cormier again. Do you think, though, Weidman will stick at 185 long term?
I mean, he's another guy who could easily go to 205, I'm sure.
Yeah.
Not only does he have the skill set, he's got I think the body. He could make 205 and still be a decent size 205er. If he loses, I would definitely, that's an option I think for him, because I don't really know where he can go from there after. I mean, Yoel Romero's beat him, and that means Luke Rockhold will have beat him twice. You've got to then get to the back of the line. I think his stock would drop a lot if he loses to Luke Rockhold again in the middleweight division, whereas he could get more of a fresh slate at the light heavyweight division. So I think that is a possibility for him.
Yeah, and the one thing, I guess this is kind of the likelihood of it happening is slim to none. But he is his best, one of his best friends is Gian Vellante. He fights at 205. They train together. He's a fellow New Yorker. Now Vellante isn't a top 10 guy. Never been a top 10 guy. He briefly cracked into the rankings within the last few years, and now he's back into having some troubles. He lost his last fight to Sam Alvey, I think maybe. Anyways, he hasn't won much lately, so that probably wouldn't be an issue. Maybe it might even give Weidman, a good try. I know they train together now, so that would help out. But I guess ultimately with Chris Weidman, my feeling is right now, I just want more Chris Weidman, wherever it is, in the UFC. I believe that he didn't just beat Anderson Silva because Anderson Silva's prime was over. I believe he beat Anderson Silva in his prime. Would you agree with that?
100% agree with that. You're right on. I think, and he did it twice. So you can't dismiss that. He's a heck of a fighter. I don't think his fighting days are over yet. I know he's had a string of some bad losses, but I think he's still a top top 5 guy. I just think with the losses that he's had, it's hard to keep him there with the guys who are in there. And I think 205 would be a good option for him.
Yeah, and it seems like as guys get older, like I said, they always move up. But 205, there was almost this wave of talent. It looked like for a while where Jimmy Manuwa and Corey Anderson and OSP and Jan Blankowitz and some other guys like that, Misha Sirkinov, who's still ranked 10th. And they kind of were coming. It looked like the new wave of light heavyweights
Yeah.
and everything. And they've kind of middled out and not really penetrated that top 2 or 3. You know what I mean? Where you've got, Ozdemir's been the exception, but he got waxed in his title fight, which was probably a little premature. But for some reason, it wasn't that long ago. Remember when the light heavyweight division was the division in the UFC?
Easily. It had all the guys that with pride. Oh yeah.
That had, Rampage and Chuck Liddell, even Randy Couture fought down in there. I mean, so many guys. And
Ortiz, Shogun.
Oh yeah. And now it's like Shamrock, and now it's like Cormier was short on opponents, so short on opponents that he had to fight Ozdemir prematurely. And I think, first of all, let me say, Gustafsson is so long overdue for a rematch.
Oh yeah.
Not only for what he did to John Jones, got to admit, he's the closest that's ever come to defeating John Jones. The Matt Hamill was a disqualification. That I don't even hear about that on John Jones records. John Jones is undefeated, and Alexander Gustafsson almost changed that. Closer than Cormier ever came, and he also put a number on Cormier too. And so he lost that fight. But God, Gustafsson is so overdue for a title shot. And
I agree. He's probably the most overdue in the UFC for a title.
Yeah, I would agree. And I could see, Anthony Smith only ranked 9th now, but he had a couple big wins. One of those coming against Rashad Evans, and I can't remember who Anthony Smith just knocked out. But he's on the rise, and I kind of think that moving forward, it's going to be Gustafsson and maybe Rockhold if he comes up. Because to me, Rockhold Gustafsson is within the next year the fight to make at 205. Rockhold, Gustafsson. Stylistically, I think it would be unbelievable to watch those two guys stand out. Do you think that's one of the best fights to make, like dream fights?
And as far as the 205 division goes, if Cormier leaves, Luke Rockhold coming over, that is the fight to make. I know on paper it's a sexy fight, but like stylistically, I'd love to see that fight. I mean, you're talking about good strikers, tall guys. They've got, especially with Luke Rockhold, a very well-rounded game that we've seen time and time again. He's great on the ground. He's good standing up. And like you said, Gustafsson gave John Jones all he could handle, particularly in the stand-up and the stand-up defense. And when I saw that fight, I actually didn't know who won. I thought it could have been a draw. I kind of was leaning more towards Gustafsson. It was that was a heck of a fight. So he needs a title shot. If he's not going to get it anytime soon, I would love to see him and Luke Rockhold fight.
Yeah, it would be unbelievable to watch that fight, and it would definitely, you wouldn't end up with one of these kind of everybody sitting on the ground or rolling around. There wouldn't be any lulls in the action, I don't think. And really, if Rockhold's going to move up to 205, then really Rockhold and Gustafsson may be between those two who's going to kind of reign over the division the next 2 years. So it might very quickly turn into a fight that absolutely needs to happen. Not just for the fans, but I mean for the division. But you never know what's going to happen with that division with so many guys coming in and out, and Jimmy Manuwa is so inconsistent, and then you got guys like Corey Anderson who could look like a top two or a top 3 contender one night, and then the other night get flattened. So it's so hard to tell where that division's headed. But anyways, that will be the end of All 5 Rounds, episode 3. I'd like to thank my co-host, Daren Loucks. As always, All 5 Rounds is brought to you by Dialogue. Go to getdialogue.com, click host a call, and get started. Thank you so much for joining us. In the future, we're going to be trying some different formats. We're going to try to have some fighter interviews and things like that. But most importantly, we're going to stick to 25 minutes, or around there. And so stay tuned to some of the changes we're making, and we're going to have multiple episodes every week. And thanks again for joining us. This has been All 5 Rounds with Ty O'Keefe and Daren Loucks, episode 3.